Hello, everyone, and welcome to tonight's season finale edition of the Draft Countdown podcast. I'm your co-host, Brian Bosarge. As always, my co-host, Shane P. Hallam. Shane, 343 days, 22 hours, 59 minutes, 39 seconds away from the 2023 NFL Draft.
We'll be talking about that 2023 draft tonight, and this is going to be our last podcast for a while. We're going to take the summer off until we relaunch in mid to late August next year before the college football season kicks off. So this is it. We made it. Made it year one of us taking over Draft Countdown, Brian.
Yeah, it's been a wild ride, man. It's been fun for sure. A lot of work we put into this relaunch, and got through the 2022 NFL Draft for the most part. Actually, yeah, I think we are done with our 2022 content. So, but yeah, as I said, this is going to be our last podcast for a little bit outside of some sort of draft emergency that comes up. Number one or first round picks start getting traded. I might come on and talk about that over the summer a little bit. But if you're listening live or watching live, you got any questions, hit us up in the chat or on Twitter at Draft Countdown, and we'll get to them. We've already got a couple, or at least one in there, Shane, we'll get to later. But we, as you said earlier, we're going to break down some of the 2023 position groups. And I did a little look back at my 2022 mock draft. It's going to be publishing this weekend at Draft Countdown. A lot is going to change, Shane, from where we see things right now to how things are going to end up. And that will no different than, like I said, when I look back and saw some of the names that I had as first round picks on that first initial mock draft in August as to where they end up. So with that being said, Shane, you really have watched a lot more of these prospects than I have. So kind of go through your process on how you come up with your rankings, these early rankings for 2023 draft. You've ranked 2024 players, 2025 players. Talk to everybody how you kind of go about that.
So I think for me, and I think it's important to note when you look at a mock draft for 2023, there's been a lot of kind of poo-pooing the early mock drafts out there on social media. Like I'm really projecting, okay, what happens if this player progresses like from what I've seen, right? What happens if they take the next step? And I think that's important to note that it's not saying this is my prediction. This is what the draft is going to be, right? Like, that's not until the final mock draft is really the only time that I'm predicting, hey, this is what the draft will look like. It's about at this point, and even during the college season, okay, what happens if these players get better? Like CJ Stroud and Bryce Young, I'm going to talk about in a little bit as the top two quarterbacks. We're putting them as top two quarterbacks, assuming they get better and they show that improvement. If they don't, Spencer Rattler last year, like Sam Howell, right? Like, no, then they're not there anymore. But if Sam Howell had gotten better, if Spencer Rattler had gotten better, they probably would have been top picks in last year's draft. And so that's really what this is. It's about, okay, who are some guys you can watch? Who are some guys that if they improve? I think that's just an important note that I'm not saying, Tyler Van Dyke, he's top 50 pick right now. If we had the draft today. Nope, he's not. He's not a first round pick. But if he progresses like he did last year, he will be. He can be. I think that's important to note. And that's why you have guys that you can criticize when the first round, when we have players that don't even get drafted, right? We both had that in our first mock drafts this year. It's going to happen again. And it's about those players not living up to the expectations that we have for them watching them now. And I think that's important to note of what this means. It's not what I think people just assume me going crazy with these future mock drafts. Like, I'm just projecting, hey, if this players is good and continues to be as good as they have been, this is what I think will happen. And but that's obviously not going to be the case.
Is Arch Manning the number one pick in the 2026 draft?
It's close. It's close. I think it's close. I probably not for me, actually, but that's for another time, I guess.
Another time.
A year from now, we'll get into that.
So let's talk about quarterbacks because we have to. And as we said, we just got through saying, in both of our first mock drafts a year ago, we both had Sam Howell and Spencer Rattler 1-2 in the draft. Rattler's currently at the University of South Carolina, not Oklahoma, and Sam Howell was drafted in the 5th round. So obviously, like you said, they didn't progress. Now we look at the 2023 draft, and the top of that is C.J. Stroud from Ohio State, who looked awesome. You know, I didn't put the full analyzation on him, but I mean, he looked awesome in passing. Same with Bryce Young. Now, questions with Bryce Young we'll get to in just a second. You mentioned Tyler Van Dyke, a guy who I only watched one game of last year and wasn't paying attention to Tyler Van Dyke. I actually went back and looked at his stat line. It was really good from that game that I watched. And then Anthony Richardson's another one who's only played a handful of games, right? So we're really projecting him. But two guys or maybe three guys here that are 5, 6, and 7 on your rankings, we kind of do have a good idea of what they are because we've seen a lot from them. Because we studied them last year thinking they were prospects for, the 2022 draft, looking at Grayson McCall from Coastal Carolina, who was a redshirt sophomore and thus draft eligible. Hendon Hooker from Tennessee, who really emerged last year as a potential top quarterback prospect, would have went to the Senior Bowl had he not decided to go back to school. And Phil Yurkovich, Notre Dame transferred to Boston College. So those are 7 names right there. And that's before you even get into some other guys like Will Levis, Tanner McKee, and some other guys.
Yeah, I mean, I think Bryce Young, C.J. Stroud, Bryce Young from Alabama, obviously, are easily the top 2. But I almost put it like 50-50 if they're going to be the top 2 next year. Because generally, I looked it up. Like the last time that we had a preseason, the top 2 quarterbacks were the first 2 off the board. Not like first 2 picks, but just first 2 off the board. I think it was 2009. I think it's been a long time since like the 2 quarterbacks going into the season that were kind of consensus, first. These are the top 2 quarterbacks. The last time that really happened, who were they in 2009? Matthew Stafford and Mark Sanchez. I would say that's probably the last time it's happened. So it's pretty rare. Like, I think it's a good shot. Bryce Young's not a top 2 quarterback. You mentioned, the size is the question. He's not going to be 6 feet tall, despite being listed there. And he's not going to be 200 pounds. Maybe he can bulk up to that. That's a little bit scary, I think, for him. And that's part of the issue.
Yeah, I mean, you do. And size is going to be the thing. C.J. Stroud, I mean, he looks the part for sure right now. But does he continue to develop? Size is not a question for Van Dyke or Richardson, that's for sure.
No,
those are some. But for Van Dyke, I mean, the question is can he move? He did not do much of that in the box score scouting I did.
Well, it's kind of interesting because neither is Stroud or Young. And I think we kind of accept that they can move because in high school, Young, especially in high school, he ran a ton. Stroud did not, but kind of flashed that at times in high school. But like they didn't either. So it's really interesting because, Van Dyke from Miami didn't do it. I think has a little bit of that potential. And Anthony Richardson from Florida, he's the guy that kind of Cam Newton like QB power. They, when they did bring him in last year, he was doing some of that. So it's kind of interesting that he's the guy that we definitely know can be a running quarterback. He's the biggest of the 4.
I mean, there's a lot of these guys I want to watch because I see a lot of hype for Will Levis, and he's going to from the pro style offense. Same with Tanner McKee or from Stanford, another guy who I heard people bandying could have been a first-round pick last year. Okay, I have no idea. There's only one quarterback on this list, Shane, that I want to see be overly successful this year.
Who is that, Brian?
That would be Spencer Rattler. I want to see the resurgence of Spencer Rattler this year to first round status. Because if he does, then that means South Carolina's winning. Let's move on to running backs. And there are a couple of names here that I am interested to see, mainly the one that you have at the top, because I'm firmly on team don't draft running back in the first round. And you are telling me that Bijan Robinson from Texas is that guy, is that dude. Talk to me about Bijan Robinson.
Yeah, he is that dude. He's got to be, I would say, probably 5'11.5", 215 to 220 pounds. And I mean, he's not going to run a 4.3, probably even a 4.4. But if he runs in the 4.5s, and I mean, his short area quickness is just so exceptional, and he can run through you. Like he's to me the best running back prospect since Saquon Barkley. And I'm with you. I'm not team draft running back high. I wouldn't take Bijan in the top 10, but it wouldn't surprise me. I think he's that type of game changer, has been from day one, 5-star recruit, top of his class at going to Texas. Now Texas is putting together a really good offense this year. So I think we could see even more. Maybe they even splits a little bit, and they're like, all right, he's good. Like he could go to the NFL right now. So I think he'll be a first-round pick. I feel pretty confident that he'll be a first-round selection come next year.
I know a little bit about Zach Evans, transfer from TCU to Ole Miss. Saw him play in a couple of games last year when I was, watching Obina Easy and those guys. So I have a little familiarity to him, and I know he has the breakaway ability that we want. I've also seen enough of Tank Bigsby to be intrigued. A guy I know, two guys I know little about in your top 5, and I want to get your take on these guys. Jahmyr Gibbs, Georgia Tech to Alabama this year, and Sean Tucker from Syracuse.
Jahmyr Gibbs is going to be the best pass-catching running back in this draft. I mean, at Georgia Tech, he was just an elite pass catcher out in space.
I do like that.
Yeah, and that's your thing. So I think you'll really like him. And so I'm intrigued to see if Alabama uses him in that way, because he is smaller. He's probably going to be around 200 pounds, hopefully a little bit over that. But, I mean, he's one of those guys that you don't get a clean tackle on. Even Georgia Tech's offense is awful. I mean, their offensive line was terrible, and he was making plays. He was that entire offense. So I think he has first-round potential, especially being an Alabama running back. He's going to get the workload for that. And Sean Tucker's just really interesting because he's kind of quietly put together a really good career. This past season, almost 1,500 yards, over 6 yards a carry in the ACC, and had a string of, I think it was like 700-yard games in a row. Just like super productive, kind of bell cow type of running back who has good vision, like low to the ground, really compact. He's good. He can catch the football. I think just going to Syracuse, people kind of don't know about him, but he has the talent to probably be a 4-4 player as well. So I really like him as a day 2 running back there.
You mentioned bell cow Alabama running backs, and Tommy said he was skeptical of the Steelers drafting Harris in round 1, but he thinks he's shown his worth, Shane. I don't know that are you there with that?
I still wouldn't have taken Najee Harris round 1, but I mean, like he's as good as you can ask for, I think, when you're taking a running back there. But yeah.
We saw a little bit of Zach Charbonnet last year, and I think he's really good. You said you don't know such and such if Sean Tucker is going to be that speedy guy. Devin A-Chain is going to be. That guy's going to run fast, right?
Yeah, he's going to compete for that fastest 40 time at the combine. He's going to be a 4.3 from Texas A&M, 5'9", 185, kind of hybrid running back receiver, one of those types. That's the kind of guy I have trouble ranking because I think he's an explosive playmaker. It's probably going to go like top 100, but it's right. Always tough to put that at running back.
I don't want to spoil your sleeper column you got coming up here, but there's another name here that I think you're going to touch on in that article.
Yeah, another South Dakota State running back, Isaiah Davis, is maybe on par with Pierre Strong in terms of talent. Very different running backs. Isaiah Davis is kind of more that bigger bruiser, 6'1", 220. But I mean, when he was on the field, he was super productive, had some injuries this year. So if you're looking for maybe the top small school skill position player, I think it's Isaiah Davis this year from South Dakota State.
Let's move on to some more skill positions on offense. And there are at least 3 guys here in your top 5 that I know a lot about, despite them not being draft eligible, because I watched football. And Jackson Smith and Jigba from Ohio State, 300-plus yards in the Rose Bowl. Kayshon Boutte, LSU, he's next there. And Jordan Addison, we don't know where he's playing yet. We can make assumptions, but we don't know. We don't think it's going to be Pittsburgh.
It is not. It is not.
But we don't officially know where he's going to play football yet. But those are three guys I think are going to probably – I feel good about going in the first round.
I think unless something majorly happens, I think like Jackson Smith-Njigba is going to go. He was just excellent last year. Most productive Ohio State receiver. We had the other two go in the top 15. So you probably feel good about that. I think could be a big slot. That's what he is doing at Ohio State. Kayshon Boutte is interesting because I think he is probably the most complete receiver, but has had multiple injuries now the past 2 seasons. Already has gotten some criticism from head coach Brian Kelly. So if there's one guy I think could fall off this list, I think it's him just for that. But in terms of pure talent, I mean, he was dominating like Jamar Chase when Chase and Terrace Marshall were gone as a true freshman. And then Addison won the Biletnikoff. And so like if he goes to Southern Cal or Texas with Quinn Ewers or Caleb Williams, I mean, the sky's the limit for him too. So, and I really like Quentin Johnston, the receiver from TCU, who 6'4", 193, big, probably 4.4 flat speed at that size. I mean, he's going to be a big athlete who can score from anywhere on the field. I think he's super intriguing, and I think he's getting overlooked in this class so far.
Jordan Addison took one look at Keaton Slovis and like, nope, gotta go.
I think there was money calling his name that made that decision for him.
Sure. Couple of Maryland guys here in your top 10. One, I mean, I love Dante Demas, and I really hope he bounces back from his injury. I am concerned because I felt the same way about Reggie Roberson the year before and his injuries, and he was not the same this past season. So I really hope that same doesn't befell Demas. But Raheem Jarrett is a stud, and now he's draft eligible too. So I've seen both of those guys. I've watched a lot of Maryland these last couple of seasons, so I feel pretty good about those guys. Is there a receiver maybe further down, Shane, that you really like here that could make that rise?
Well, I'm kind of intrigued. So Jordan Addison moving on from Pitt, Kanata Mumpfield is really interesting, who's transferring into Pitt from the MAC. And, those MAC receivers seem to have some success. He had a great spring game, 6'1", 180, separation easily, was getting that separation in the spring game for Pitt. So I think if there's a player that kind of emerges from Addison leaving, Mumpfield's going to fit that role. But there's a ton of guys. This is another going to be deep receiver class. I could name names for days, but we'll keep rolling here.
Yeah. Let's talk about tight ends. And he's finally draft eligible. I don't know if Dwayne's watching tonight, but I feel like he asked almost every week about Michael Mayer in the chat last week. Well, he's draft eligible now for 2023. And there was something you said in the Devi Marketplace Discord server the other day. And when I was doing my recap or review of my mock draft 1.0 the other day, Michael Mayer he's not going to get Weidermeyer, is he?
I mean, I hope not, but he's not going to be like super fast. I don't think Michael Mayer is a super athlete. Hopefully he's not as bad as Jalen Weidermeyer. I don't think that's the case. So I think the consistent production and the fact that he got better from year 1 to year 2 while Weidermeyer got worse, I think is a good sign for Michael Mayer to still be a first round pick. I think both of us have him fairly high in our mock drafts. So maybe he doesn't quite go that high, but I think he's still going to be a first rounder. I mean, he's just an elite red zone guy, good blocker, 250. I think teams are going to like him.
I had him in my first round mock draft. That might have been too rich. I don't want to call him a poor man's, because I think poor man is shortchanging him a little bit. Let's call him middle class Kyle Pitts. Jaheim Bell, South Carolina. I really want to. I think he has that athletic profile that Pitts has. Not as good, but I really want to see him be utilized more, because when South Carolina got the football in his hands, he made plays, but it didn't seem like they did it nearly enough. Which is that on the coaching staff, or is there something I'm missing here why they're not calling his number as often as they probably should?
You had some quarterback issues there at South Carolina last year. Let's be fair.
That is true.
I think that was part of the problem of
true.
Getting the ball to G. Now, if G-Bo wants to be Kyle Pitts, he better grow 3 inches and gain 25 pounds.
That's why I said middle.
Tiny man's Kyle Pitts, perhaps, is the way to go. But yeah, I mean, he's my number 2 tight end. I just think he's such a good playmaker this year with the weapons around him. Because I'll be highlighting a South Carolina receiver in my sleeper article coming out.
I know which one.
You know which one. So I think South Carolina offense could be good. I think Bell could really emerge from that. Yeah, I'm on board with him. I mean, as a first round pick, I just think size, it's not going to happen unless he wants to make that move to receiver. But I think day 2.
And he could
do that. Yeah.
And I say that because there's another South Carolina tight end on this list here that we liked a little bit last year out of Oklahoma, who's now transferred over with Rattler, and that's Austin Stogner there, who is more of a traditional tight end, more of an inline, get after it guy. So that's interesting to me. Couple of high-profile Georgia players here that, for one reason or another, haven't produced a lot. And there's another Georgia tight end here who's better than both of them that's not on this list because he's not draft eligible. So are we going to even see enough here from Darnell Washington or Eric Gilbert to justify these lofty tight end rankings here, Shane?
Look, I think it's going to be James Cook-esque, right? You might not see a lot of them, but then they just move up the draft board. I mean, Darnell Washington, 6'7", 265. Like he's an offensive tackle who can leap and catch the football really, really well. I mean, there's some upside there. He was a high 4-star recruit. Then Eric Gilbert was like 5-star all world. Went to kind of bounced around because of some off the field academic issues. Some rumors his weight bubbled up. If he reaches his potential, Eric Gilbert could be the best tight end in this class, like bar none, easy. He has that kind of skill set and athleticism, but we haven't seen a darn thing, from him. So any Eric Gilbert like first round mock drafts is all projection. So I put him conservatively at 7 right now. For now,
I don't know a lot about him, but I'm just going to assume the best testing tight end in this class is Samuel Porta from Iowa. I have no idea, but if history has told me anything, it's that an Iowa tight end is going to test really well, Shane.
Yes.
I mean, anything less than a 9-1 RAS, I will be disappointed.
Not 9-1 on the dot. I mean, he could get close to that. I think he has that ability. And yeah, there's a couple good Iowa tight ends for them this year. So watch Samuel Porta. I think when you watch him, you'll fall in love with them. Everyone out there for sure.
We'll call it a sleeper-ish guy, but you were on this guy's train last year before he went back to school, and that's North Dakota State Bison tight end Noah Gindorff, 6'6", 266. What you like about this guy?
Yeah, I just think he's a very sound blocker. They use him a lot as a blocking tight end. So not like big production, but nice soft hands. I thought after the catch he showed a little bit. So I mean, he's a day 3 guy, but I think he's a draftable tight end that I feel pretty confident about that's going to make an NFL team. I just think no one's said his name, and he's in my top 10 tight ends for this year because I've seen him play and seen him play well.
Let's move on to the blockers up front, and I will say this, looking at the offensive tackles, I am not comfortable saying anything about any of these guys. The only one I have watched in your top 10 enough to have a formed opinion on is Zion Nelson from Miami. But a lot of love out there for Peter Skaronski from Northwestern and Paris Johnson from Ohio State. So start with Johnson because I figured that's definitely more up your alley there with him, and then tell me a little bit about Skaronski.
So Johnson's a projection. He played guard this past season. He's going to kick out to the Nicholas Petit-Frere left tackle spot this year. So it's tough. He was a high-end 5-star recruit. He has the movement skills, but I haven't seen him play tackle. So like I don't know. It's one of those. Whereas his teammate DeJuan Jones, 6'8", 360, played right tackle this past season. Some good, some bad. But he probably, I feel almost more comfortable with him, right? You've seen him play right tackle. But I think both of those guys have first-round potential. Peter Scorotsky is interesting. I think from a just skill set, like consistency standpoint, he's lights out. I mean, I rarely saw him get beat from what I've watched so far. He's not your typical offense. He's not this like big, long, he doesn't have all those things. So that puts some fear in me. We've seen those kind of players not hit the heights, but he's by far the best. It's not a great tackle class yet. There's a lot of potential, but he's probably the only one I've seen that I'm like, okay, this guy can play on Sundays for sure. Everyone else you're kind of projecting they're going to get better and they're going to be able to do that.
You mentioned length issues, and that makes me think of another Northwestern offensive tackle from a couple of seasons ago that has worked out pretty well, Rashawn Slater. Who was a stud.
That's how
Skaronski
Skaronski got in, was when Slater opted out. That's when he started. So
is there any comparison with those two?
Yeah, I think it's actually a pretty good comparison. I think Skaronski has that kind of play. He's not quite as heavy, not quite as good an anchor. I wouldn't say he's as good, a player as Slater was starting out, but that kind of potential is there.
We'll quickly kick inside here. I don't know a lot about any of these guys either, but based off of your ranking of him, I put Javion Cohen in the bottom end of my first round. So is this another like we're projecting here with him?
I think the whole offensive line class is a little rough around the edges right now. Like I think Cohen was the more consistent guard last year, but definitely had some games where he did not play well. He did not get great leverage, just didn't get it, had some bad plays. So it's kind of projection. Okay, here's an Alabama guard who, if he gets better, is probably going to be a potential first-round pick. But I don't know if there's anyone here that I feel like super confident in at guard or center that will kind of be the guy.
Only one player, the one player in your top 10 guard rankings that I want to highlight is I really want to see how he plays week in, week out in the STC, because from watching him in the Sun Belt and seeing him in person last year, I was very impressed with Osiris Torrance, the former Louisiana Raging Cajun, followed his head coach, Billy Napier, to Florida. So I definitely want to see how he develops and gets because, you're going to go against some Georgia guys and those Alabama guys on the interior. It's a lot different than playing South Alabama and Louisiana Monroe, so you want to see how that goes for Torrance.
No, I think it's a good call. I also like Andrew Voorhees from Southern Cal. I think had a really good season. I was surprised he did not declare. I thought he could have been third, fourth round pick. He's probably a guy I think that has potential to really rise up as well. And Torrance is a good name for sure.
I wasn't on Tyler Linderbaum until about halfway through the season. So is any of these centers here this year's Linderbaum?
Maybe there's someone. I don't know who it is yet. I don't know. I like Cedric Von Prawn from Georgia.
What a name.
Yeah, I mean, he held down that interior of the line really, really well. So I think he's better than Justin Schaefer. I think he's better than Jamari Salyer in terms of prospect-wise. Andrew Rain from Oklahoma played well. He's my number one. But then I think there's a bunch of guys after that I'm like, like Alex Forsythe from Oregon could be that stud. I mean, he had that game against Iowa State. Like I was like, oh wow, like this center is so good. And then the next game he crapped the bed. Like there's a lot of those older centers as well in my top 10 that it could happen, but I'm not sure.
There's a guy here named Juice Scruggs. I mean, that's pretty good, right?
Penn State, he's a good player too. Penn State is a good offensive lineman this year. So Juice Scruggs.
Juice Scruggs. Let's move it on over to defense here. There's some edge rushers, Shane, and like I said, you don't have to just because he was wasn't draft eligible doesn't mean that you couldn't help but notice Will Anderson last year. You could have made an argument for him to win the Heisman last year.
He should have.
Just
I think
the season he had
yeah.
Was one of the most unbelievable seasons for a pass rusher I've ever seen at the collegiate level that Will Anderson had a year ago. I mean, what makes him so good to put up the numbers that he had, and what else do you need to see from him to think that he could be that top overall pick?
I mean, just the explosive first step, and he did a lot standing up. So he had kind of a wide variety of pass rush moves. Such a natural. I mean, his bend is so crazy that he just bent around offensive, like top offensive tackles in the SEC, just whipped right around him. They couldn't touch him, and it's crazy. I haven't seen that. Like, I just have never seen that. So, maybe it's hyperbole, but I want to say he's the best pass rusher I've ever seen. Now, the problem is he's 235 pounds, right? He's not Myles Garrett. He's not Chase Young. It's more Von Miller. That's where you're going to play him. So that could be an issue. But if he does what he did last year again, I'll say he's the best pass rusher I've ever scouted, because he was that good last year.
Yeah, he was unbelievable. I caught some flack during our live stream on day 3. Y'all were bandying about names for next year, and the name Myles Murphy come up. I didn't even know who he was. But here he is, number 2 on your edge rusher list. Good size, 6'5", 275 from Clemson. Talk to me about Myles Murphy.
I mean, he's just an impressive athlete at his size. I thought he had a really productive season for a Clemson defense that was solid, but there wasn't a ton of studs, up front, drafted last year or anything. And so in terms of pass rush, he really set the edge well. He had the most sacks on the team, pretty consistent getting pressure. And I mean, he's big and he can move. Like, when he gets to a running back cannot run through Myles Murphy. So I think he has a nice floor, and I think he has a high ceiling as well.
Jim Nagy, Senior Bowl executive director, tweeted out, and this may have been before the draft or not long after, maybe the day after the first, but he said, everybody talking about Trayvon Walker, but when you turn on the tape, it was Nolan Smith is the standout here. And I will say this, Nolan Smith did stand out to me a fair amount last year. Another guy, similar build to Will Anderson, so not going to be your traditional – he's not the traditional set the edge run defender like Myles Murphy is, but Nolan Smith, another guy that can just get after the quarterback.
Yeah, I mean, when Adam Anderson was released from the team and Nolan Smith went in there, I mean, he just wreaked havoc. And he another guy, 5-star recruit, didn't do much early in his career, but I mean, such a good athlete. Like, this class has a ton of those stand-up, fast, bendable edge rushers that can just get around the edge. I mean, Nolan Smith, I thought, he got better in the run game too. I mean, he started to really put it together last year, and if he takes another step, he's going to be the best defender on that Georgia team this year to me.
There's a lot of good edge rushers in this class. And there's some names that are further down the list here that they have questions about. Can they maybe need to bounce back, albeit from injury or just a down year? Zach Harrison of Ohio State, I had my first mock draft a year ago going in the first round. Production dipped off last year. But Zion Tapuola Fatui from Washington, injury coming back from that. Brenton Cox was down a little bit from Florida. We both kind of liked him. A couple other guys that I think are that I've watched in this class that I think are really good. Will Mcdonald from Iowa State is another. But here's a name here at 13 who I remember last year had a 4-sack game. I even wrote him up in my week review columns, even though he wasn't draft eligible, and that's Kansas State Felix Anadike Uzama, 6'4", 253, 4-sack. I can't remember who it was against, but he had 4 sacks in one game last year. So big guy there. But talk to me about your 4 and 5 guys here, because I have not – we'll just skip over B.J. Ojolari, who I assume is related to Aziz.
They're brothers. So.
Okay, well, that makes sense. Talk to me about Baldonado here, number 5 from Pittsburgh, who help me out on that first name.
Yeah, Habakkuk Baldonado from Pitt. I mean, Pitt's going to have a killer defensive line this year. He was 255, just a really good, strong lower body. He could drive players, kind of use his strength to get to the quarterback, a little raw, but he started to really pick it up late in the season of just consistent pressured Sam Howell when he played North Carolina. He was a big part of that. Just a really impressive length, size, athleticism. I think there's a lot of raw tools there that are super interesting. Pitt could have, I think, multiple top 100 defensive linemen in this class.
And we also have the cousin of Jadeveon Clowney on this group. It'll be redshirt sophomore edge rusher from Mississippi. Is it Demon?
I think it's Demone. I want to say it's not pronounced Demon, but it's spelled Demon.
Demon Clowney.
Which is cool.
34th on your edge rusher.
Yeah, he hasn't done much yet, but we'll see what happens.
GTN had a question in the chat. This feels apropos to talk about it here. What do the 3 techs look like, Shane? Top 5, 7, mid to late first area. Early, I know.
Yeah. I mean, it's tough. I think, could Jalen Carter from Georgia play there? I think he could. He honestly was probably the best defensive lineman on Georgia's team last year. So he's going to get drafted probably top 5. I guess I misspoke saying Nolan Smith be the best defender from Georgia this year. Jalen Carter clearly will be, and he's going to go really high. I think he can play 3 tech, but kind of the next group, I think Brian Breesy from Clemson had a big injury last year, but kind of flashed as a freshman. Your boy Zach Pickens from South Carolina, I'm a big fan of his.
Also very flashy.
Yeah, right. Kind of does some good things, goes away for a while. But I also really like Justin Igboe. I'm not saying his last name correctly, from Alabama. As he's kind of a smaller, penetrating 3 tech. I think that's an ideal spot for him. So he's a name to look out for too.
Speaking of flashy, I think after that first game when I was raving about Jermaine Johnson, I added Fabian Lovett to that list because of the flash that he had in that opening game for Florida State. So he's another lot of flash. We got a lot of sizzle here, Shane, with this defensive line class. I guess we'll see how much steak we get out of it. Let's move on to linebackers now. And there's a name at the top that is familiar to people in the draft circle here, as his brother Penny was top 6 pick last 2021. So Noah Sewell has had some injuries, right? He's dealt with some injuries at Oregon, but really good.
Yeah, I mean he's been like phenomenal. Justin Flau came in. They kind of came in together as high recruits. Flau was kind of the guy everyone was talking about. And then Sewell was the player that stepped in day one and was just productive, great tackler. He's big. He has good range. Like his agility's off the charts. I think if the medical is good, he's going to be a first-round pick. I'd be pretty surprised if he doesn't play up to that this year.
I don't know much about Trenton Simpson. I know about as much of him as I do about Miles Murphy from Clemson. Maybe I just blocked them out. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe you just have some anti-Clemson bias over there.
But a couple of guys we scouted significantly last year, Henry To'o for Alabama and DeMarvion Overshawn, who both guys had some flaws in the tape. So I'm not unhappy that they went back to school.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, having them in my top 5, I think if both take a step forward, they both can be, day 2 picks. Because there were definitely games, especially for Overshawn, where I thought that was, he could be that. 2020 had a rough year. So I think it could be Christian Harris like where, okay, these guys aren't first round picks anymore, but they could be day 2 guys and, be solid, small, kind of outside linebackers.
Owen Papo's another one that was highly thought of coming into the process last year, with injuries, kind of fell out of the conversation. I got one more guy I want to talk about from Alabama. We'll get to him in a second, but I can't help but notice some Conference USA and Sun Belt here at 5 and 6. Shane, Tyler Grubbs, Louisiana Tech, and Richard Gibonor from Troy. 6 and 7 or 5 and 6 on this list.
Yeah, look at that. Tyler Grubbs, he's been a starter since he stepped on campus. Was a 3-star, I think he's a 3-star player who tackle machine. I mean, he just wraps up like he is so good at reading and identifying. I think he plays so smart. I think he's super underrated right now. And Gibonor had a really great season last year. They used him as a pass rusher, dropped him back into coverage. I mean, he just, he was the name I kind of got tipped to, and I went back and watched. I was like, wow, I mean, he is by far the best player on that defense and is doing everything. So, yeah, I think there's going to be some decent smaller school linebackers in this class.
Last guy here I want to talk about, Demouy Kennedy, Alabama, down here at 17 on your list. Be a junior this year, I presume. Same high school as C.J. Mosley. And I've told this story. I didn't see Kennedy play in high school. But I did see C.J. Mosley play in high school. And I think he's probably the best high school football player I've ever seen in person. And I don't know if they're similar players. I have no idea. But so I'll be anxious to see, put him on the list, get the eyeballs on him. His high school is scum, trash, and I hate him.
Wow.
But
harsh.
It is what it is.
Yeah. Kennedy hasn't done much yet. I mean, he was a special teams guy last year. He actually had 7 carries as a running back. So, he has the athleticism. So I'm interested to see if he plays this year. He should start.
If anybody from Theodore, Alabama is listening out there right now, I mean scum in the nicest possible way.
just losing a listener. Just that's it.
Let's move on to defensive backs here. We'll start with corners. Number 1 corner on your list is LSU transfer to Alabama. Was he arrested?
Yeah, I think he was, and he was let go, and it was that's fine.
So
speeding, marijuana.
So this will be one of those we'll handle this one internally type deals, and he probably misses no time or misses a half or something. But Eli Ricks, what do you like about this guy?
I mean, we saw Derek Stingley get drafted top 3, number 1 corner off the board. I thought Eli Ricks outplayed him, game to game the past 2 seasons. I think Eli Ricks, similar to Stingley, stepped in as a freshman, was really exceptional. 6'2", good size, good length, good speed, and just a very sticky cover corner. I think there's a lot of potential there. We'll see what he does at Alabama. I don't think it's set in stone. Like, I think he could take a step back. It could be a situation where he doesn't play up to that, but I think he has all the tools.
You mentioned him a lot on the podcast during the season, and my opinions of his father notwithstanding. Joey Porter Jr. from Penn State, great size. I assume he has some of that tenacity there.
Yeah, and he's a playmaker too. Pick 6 last year. If you watch him late in the season, I mean, he got better and better and better. And then late in the season, I thought he was one of the best corners in college football. And I think he's going to show that this season. I think Joey Porter Jr., top 100 pick. Definitely has a shot at round one. So, I've been a big fan from the beginning, so I'm excited to see how it does this year.
Just for fun, I mocked him to the Bengals in my 2023 mock draft, just for fun.
We'll see where I put him just for fun in my 7th round.
Last seen sealing the national championship game for Georgia with a pick 6. Caillou Ringo, will be a redshirt sophomore corner here. We're just not going to draft small corners anymore, are we?
No, it might be out the window. Some of those small corners, he is so big. He's fast. He's probably 4.4 flat kind of guy. He's like the anti-Darian Kendrick, and I thought he should have been playing more than Darian Kendrick last season. And I think he's going to show that this year. I think Ringo is going to be really, really good.
Number 5 on your list, you came a calling, Shane.
I did.
Talk to me about Cam Smith. He has consistency issues. I'll say that. But when he's on, he's on. And could be one of the better corners in this class if he's on. So I like Cam Smith. Another guy further down that I liked a lot last year was Caillou Kelly from Stanford. Want to see if he continues to improve. And I'm going to go on the record right now. And the player who could have that Daxton Hill level rise in this class is that sort of hybrid nickel safety type of guy is Jamie Robinson from Florida State. South Carolina transfer, was really good last year. I think as that nickel or a guy who could play free safety even, I think he could I think he's going to test well. Could be that guy that could end up in that late first, early second round area by the time the process cleans itself out.
I think there's a lot of guys with that kind of upside that could do that. I even like Garrett Williams from Syracuse as a potential player there. I think corner is going to be really strong again this year. I think it's going to be a strong group. Yeah,
absolutely. And we didn't even talk about Avery Young, a guy who we both watched last year and thought could have been drafted maybe even top 100 a year ago had he come out. Let's move on to safety, where a couple of familiar names here because we've been watching them for a little while. Brandon Joseph transferred from Northwestern over to Notre Dame. He's going to have to try to bounce back a little bit. And Jordan Battle, another guy, and Jalen Catalan. All three of these guys kind of need to all went back to school, all could have entered last year's draft, all needed to go back to school to kind of get that reputation back a little bit.
Yeah, I felt like Catalan maybe should have come out. I thought, he probably could have been in that top 100 mix. I thought he had a good season, but has potential to be the top safety in this group. I think any of those guys could end up being first-round picks or could end up being third-round picks. My top player is Malachi Moore from Alabama, who kind of nickel corner safety, plays a lot of nickels, so it might end up being a corner. It's a little tough with a couple of these Alabama guys of like what they are, but I mean he's a playmaker. He despite his size, he can tackle. Like he's really, really talented, really fast, just quick and athletic.
Well, it's another guy you have a little further down, Trey Dean from Florida. I would have looked at him as a corner maybe, or at least I thought he played corner at one point in time. So you could have a lot of those where we're going to have questions because you have 3 Alabama safeties in your top 10. They all 3 can't be on the field at the same time. So you have to assume that one could end up being in that nickel. Like you said, that might be Malachi Moore.
Yeah, that's what he played last year. And I also really like Antonio Johnson of Texas A&M. Big, came in as a corner. I actually had him in my corner rankings for a while and moved into safety when I went back and watched. It's like, oh, he's playing safety. But I think he's a name to keep in mind too. So,
is there a punt god in this class?
No, I think kickers are going to be the specialists. Of this
kickers class. Making a comeback here.
Yeah.
Yeah,
sure. So I think there are 3 that could have come out and gotten drafted this year. So, they're probably going to get drafted next year.
I only really know one, and that's because I watch a lot of Alabama games, and that's Will Reichert, who I don't think has missed a kick at Alabama, right?
I don't think he has. So that's pretty good.
And they've got a Carlson down here for Auburn, another Carlson. So that's good. You have Mitch Jeter from South Carolina ranked as 12th on your kicker list. He's never kicked a field goal. So we'll see how that goes.
Look, he was that means I watched high school films, so back in the day. That's what that means. We'll see how it goes. Look, Parker White, just replace him with an even better kicker. Here it comes.
There you go.
But yeah, Noah Ruggles from Ohio State, Jake Moody from Michigan, both were in contention for the big trophy there for kickers. So.
Let's say this. If Will Reichert is Senior Bowl eligible, write it down.
He will be there.
He will be the kicker.
Does not matter. He will be there. I don't care about long snappers. So anyway, I don't know yet. But
so that's we've gone through all the positions now, Shane. Compared to this time last year, how do you feel about the 2023 class as you comparatively speaking that you felt about the 2022 class?
Compared to this time last year, I think I feel a little better about 23 class. I think at the top, I feel like it's going to be a better class as a whole. I don't think the depth will be there like we had in 22. I think that the well's going to dry up probably past the top 100. But I think if you stack the top 100s against each other right now, I think, this and 22 a year ago, I think 23 I'd probably feel a lot better about it as a better group as a whole, better class coming up. But I don't know, maybe it's just optimism, not remembering, but I think 23 is going to be a good class, but a smaller class.
All righty. Let's see if we've got any questions on the Twitter. We do not. So let's answer some chat questions here. We answered one earlier for G10. I don't know if this is a question, more of a comment, but he's happy with his Cowboys haul for 2022, Shane?
Yeah, it looked pretty good. He asked about Deron Bland, who I wasn't super high on, but has some of that athletic upside at corner. So defensive back, special teams. We talked about it last week. I think Dallas's draft was underrated.
And a question here from Zach Grubel. Better prospect, Bijan Robinson or Travion Henderson?
Yeah, from Ohio
State.
Hey,
I watch football, Shane.
Yeah, no, look. I know you're a Buckeye fan at heart, so I think Bijan's a better prospect right now. I think Travion Henderson, if he improves, and he could be on that same tier in a year. I think there's a couple things vision-wise he has to clean up, but I think Bijan is the better running back at this point.
Well, Shane, that is it for season 1 of the Draft Countdown podcast. Overall, man, I mean, I feel good about everything we've done this year. I'm quite sure you do the same, right?
Yeah, I thought it went really well. I think we had some good responses. Shout out to Nate for the site design, got a lot of praise and rightfully so. We'll keep kind of tweaking into that and making that better. And I thought it went really well. I think people enjoy the content, and if there's ever anything that people want or feedback, we're happy to take that as well. But for the first year, solid.
Yeah, I feel really good about it too, man. And I think it's going to get even better. We're going to keep going in 2023. Sky's the limit, man. But that's going to do it for tonight's edition of the Draft Countdown podcast. Again, we're going to take a break for a couple of months here. Shane's going to go off gallivanting through Europe.
Yes.
In a couple of weeks. I am just going to read some books. Got about a stack of 3 or 4 books here. I'm going to get caught up on my summer reading, if you will. Get to that here. But everybody who's watching, if you haven't already subscribed to the channel, go ahead and do that. Like I said, hit that notification bell. Something could come up over the summer, and then we have to get that word out. So I might pop in here to do that. So get that notification bell so you'll be notified when that happens. If you're listening to us on the audio version of it, be it on Spotify, on Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your audio podcasts, give us a good review. share the word, spread the wealth, all that good stuff, and get us out there so you can be notified of when those go live as well. Generally speaking, a few hours after we are done recording. Follow me on Twitter at Deep Fried Draft. Follow Shane on Twitter at Shane P. Hallam. Follow Draft Countdown on Twitter at Draft Countdown. Go to draftcountdown.com for everything you need in regards to the 2022 and 2023 and 2024 and 2025 NFL drafts. It's all there, man. It's all there right now. Head over there as soon as you're done listening here. And again, big shout out to everybody who is followed along. That is not right. That is actually incorrect. Thanks for everybody who has followed along all year long, and we really appreciate all your support out there. So for Shane, for myself, until next time, which may or may not be in 3 months. Later.